Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of Development Management Committee, first one of the year. I'll just go through some preliminaries first. The meeting this evening will be live streamed to the public. The recording of the meeting will be available on the Council's website within 24 hours of the meeting. Attendees are required to wear face masks on entry to the building and meeting room, which may be removed when seated. Would everyone in the council chamber please ensure you have scanned the QR NSS code app posted with your mobile phone located at the entrance of the chamber? Would members and officers please remember to switch their microphones on when speaking and speak directly into the microphone and switch microphones off when finished. Reporting officers joining the meeting using Teams, use the hands up icon on your screens for questions and comments. Please turn on your cameras and microphones. And switch off mobile phones or put them on silent. I'll go through the agenda now. The evacuation procedure for council chamber is turn left, follow the green emergency exit signs to the main town hall entrance and proceed to the assembly point at St George's Square. Item 1, any apologies tonight? Minutes of the previous meeting?
For you, Chair.
Everyone happy with those? I'll sign them. Section 106 of the Local Government Finance Act 1992. Any declarations? Any disclosure of interest tonight?
Yes, Chair. Item 7, I have a personal interest in the land west of Butterfield Green, being cabinet member responsible for cemeteries. I will leave at the.
So you're going to declare a personal and a prejudicial interest? Yes. And leave. Okay. I'd be duly recorded when the item comes up. Is there any urgent business tonight?
I have an interest to declare as well, personal and prejudicial in relation.
Lee, can you take your mask off?
Oh, yeah, right. Please. Personal and prejudicial in relation to items 8 and 9. Newlands Road, which is by, I think, 2020, which links to Luton Town, and I'm a season ticket holder.
Okay, thanks for that, and that'll be duly recorded, and then you'll leave when those items are called. I don't intend to switch the agenda items around tonight, so the first item will be.
Before you go on to the report, I haven't had a chance, and I'm sure most members are in the same position. There was about 40 or so pages were sent this afternoon. I had about 10 or 15 minutes, which even if I, did the speed reading, I couldn't possibly do that. And that will apply to all the members. And I like this to be minuted. If it is to anything to do with any of the item concern, then I feel very strongly that members should have a right to be able to read the information before they can make the decision on those matters. So we can go through, I'm asking the advice from the legal, that if we are going through those items, we need to have that information. We can still go through the items, but we need to read that before we make a decision, because otherwise I think it could be challenged by any of the objectors.
Yeah.
I was going to raise precisely the same issue. 38 pages of update received on the afternoon of the meeting is completely unacceptable. And I do not feel that I have sufficient information to deal with these applications because I, like Hussein, have not had time to read those 38 pages and I have got no idea what they say.
Which application are you referring to?
To Newlands Road.
Item 8, 9, and 14.
Yeah.
And Chair, and on pages for the Newlands Road one, Central Bedfordshire put in a lot of reservations. And the council officers responded back yesterday. It says here 4th of January, but we have not received any response back from Central Bedfordshire either. So, I don't know what we're going to do about that.
Yeah, if I can probably just help on this matter. Obviously, we're aware that it was a bit late in the day. We received the response from Central Beds. So we thought we'd put it in front of members in full because it was only received yesterday. But they have confirmed this afternoon that they've withdrawn their objection. So we were going to mention that in the presentations that we've got, that their objections are withdrawn now, subject to the conditions.
This was it sent by email? This information.
The latest email was from Central Beds this afternoon. Yeah.
Sent to members.
No, to officers.
But what was the other information that you said had been sent to you, Councillor?
We don't know.
Well,
We
you
don't
said-
know what the information is because it's 38 pages and we haven't had time to read it.
I haven't seen it either.
But you haven't even seen it.
I'm not aware.
How can we possibly consider planning applications when there's 38 pages of evidence that we haven't had chance to read and that the chair hasn't even seen? I just can't believe you're going to go ahead and consider these items.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the update sheets is just an aid for members. The substance in the updates will be covered in the officer presentation. So we'll go over exactly what is in the update sheet. So members will have all the information they need to make a decision on the applications before you today.
He's not in person tonight, but he's online. Stephen, can you hear me?
Yes, afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Stephen Sparshot, the planning solicitor. It's a case of if officers, as indeed I've just heard Mr. Winwood's, Mr. Sahadevan mention, if they feel that they can articulate sufficiently the relevant information in relation to the 4, I believe, applications that information relates to, then the meeting can proceed with officers giving the additional info as required and members asking relevant questions as necessary. I would highlight that 38 pages is quite a large number, although it's split between 4 items. And if officers can articulate the updates more than they would ordinarily do because of those additional pages that have been received. Thank you, Chairman.
So what is your advice, that we should continue to determine these applications tonight?
Yes, provided that officers give sufficient information as to what the updates actually say because of the lateness of them being submitted to you in email form.
Okay, is everyone happy with that?
No.
No?
No, I'm not.
Sorry, Chair, I don't think I won't feel comfortable with this information, and we need some time.
So there appears to be a consensus. Sorry,
Okay.
there appears to be a consensus that these items are deferred.
Chair, if I can just help on the point, say most of the 38 pages is the objection from Central Beds Council, which is set out in full, and that was explicitly put in front of members, so everything was there. But they have withdrawn that objection this afternoon, so effectively the objection is now removed. So we feel comfortable that we can proceed.
Councillor Bridgen.
Chair, we seem to be talking a lot about items 8 and 9. Should I make myself scarce for this? Because I know we haven't formally moved on to these items, but...
No, I haven't called them yet.
No.
This is a preliminary to a preliminary. Sonny, did you?
Thank you, Chair. It's just to reiterate what Clive Inwards has just said. The reason the length of the update is such is to include the full objection from Central Beds and our response. It just so happens that they've contacted us, which would have been a verbal update on both items 8 and 9, that there is no longer an objection. So the large part of the update is no longer necessary and is no longer relevant for members to pour through and digest before they make a decision. All they need to know is there is no objection from central beds in relation to items 8 and 9.
So you're saying the majority of the paperwork relates to the objection from central beds?
Chair.
David?
It covers item 13 and 14 as well. So from what I can see from my email is item 8, item 9, item 13, and item 14. That's the update. That's 38 pages.
If items 13 and 14 are single page updates, which will also be covered in the officer presentation.
Anne?
Yes, I think if there's any concern whatsoever amongst the members that they can't properly scrutinise and consider this matter, I think it should be deferred in order that there's a fair hearing of this matter. That's my view.
It's entirely up to members. So can we determine?
Would you like me to formally move that the 2 items be deferred?
Okay, and that's seconded. Okay, those in favour of...
Yeah, sorry, who seconded that?
Councillor Hussain, Mahmood Hussain. All those in favour of deferral, please show. Anyone against? So unfortunately, those 2 items have been deferred and they'll come back at the next meeting, which I think is the end of the month, isn't it, Sonny?
Yes, the next meeting is on the 26th of January.
About 3 weeks. Yeah. Okay, sorry for that, but unfortunately that's a decision been made by members, so we will not be determining those applications tonight. But it will be come back at the next meeting, about 3 weeks' time. Okay.
The other item that, the last one, I was going to ask for a member visit. Item 14.
Normally when we get to that.
Yeah, well, that's up to you. Do you want to take it now or later?
You can do it now. Proposed item 14, 27 proposed is
Member visit.
Yep, and I'll second that, Chair.
Anybody saying we shouldn't visit? Okay, that's the visit.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members, everyone. This is item 7 on the agenda, which is on page 16. The proposals before you is to redevelop land to the west of the existing burial ground. If we go on to the next slide, thanks. And redevelop that plot of land for 8,200 burial plots. The capacity will last approximately 25 years. In terms of the site is currently agricultural land, and it's surrounded by a few houses and a farm to the south. And there are sporadic homes to the east and north of this site. The site also joins Lothair Recreation Ground, also known as Stopsley Common, which is to the west. Next slide. The proposals will be based on an internal spine road layout with adjoining car parks. There is a proposed gated link between the old and new part of the cemetery. Next slide. In terms of landscaping, there is a proposal to enhance the existing biodiversity by using an 8-metre buffer wildlife enhancement zone along the western boundary. All the trees will be retained apart from one, which is a category C tree. In terms of public right of way, it is proposed that this is diverted. Next slide. So next slide. Can't really see the slide clearly, but this does show the alternative route. So where the cursor is following is the existing route, and then the cursor will show the new route that is being proposed. There will be improvements to the traffic situation along this site. There'll be additional passing bays to compensate for increased potential traffic. The site is also in flood zone 3, but there is no significant risk of groundwater pollution, but further surveys are required to be completed. In terms of consultation, next slide. In terms of key issues, the key issues is the site's sensitive location. It's in a green belt, and also it's an area of great local landscape value. And it also has archaeological and historical heritage status. Next slide. Next slide. In terms of consultation, the council consulted extensively on this site, on this proposal, and there were 22 responses, all of which were objecting to the proposals. Next slide. So in terms of officer assessment, it really comes down to two issues. One is officers recognise it's a sensitive location for all the reasons I've mentioned, but also that has to be balanced against the need for extra burial places for Luton. Currently, Luton's existing burial places will run out in 2023. So this additional space will be needed for the town for the next 25 years. In terms of the sensitivities, it's the land itself does have some ecological value, but it's very low grade. It may include some archaeological value, but we're proposing to include conditions to carry out necessary surveys. In terms of landscape value, that is also reserved by condition to ensure that we can secure appropriate landscaping for this site. There is some concern around additional traffic flows. There's no additional services proposed, and it is recognised there will be increased traffic flow. However, the proposals also propose to provide additional passing bays to ease the increase in traffic movements. And colleagues in transportation are satisfied that this doesn't pose any adverse impacts in terms of highway safety and traffic flows. In addition, members may have some questions around buildings. There's no new buildings proposed on this site. It's proposed to use the existing buildings on the old or the existing cemetery to house equipment and tools necessary for use of this site. So on balance, officers consider that planning permission should be granted for the reasons set out in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Any members' questions for clarification? Councillor Franks.
Yeah, just a couple of questions, please. Thank you. Thank you for explaining the diverted public right-of-way. That was a concern. If I'm looking at the drawing on page 19, paragraph 8, excuse me, at the top of the drawing, the northern boundary, there is an arrow and what looks like a road or footpath or whatever, and it's described as access route, and it looks to me as though it goes from Butterfield Green Road into Stopsley Common. Is that existing? I'd assumed it was the diverted public access, but Sunny obviously has given us a different route for that. So yeah, what is that, please?
Chair, if I can bring in Toby Malloy as the applicant, he might be able to assist with this question.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Sunny. Sorry, Councillor Franks, the red arrow on page 19 is on Butterfield Green Road, so it just shows the proposed access point from Butterfield Green Road for the road into the site.
So it's the existing Butterfield Green Road. Fine. Yeah, understand. Thank you for that. The other question then is on page 37, condition 17, 3 talks about publication of the post-excavation assessment analysis. I wonder if anyone could give us some clue as to how that publication is likely to be carried out, please, because I think it's very important.
Chair, if I can assist. So to discharge that condition, the applicants will need to submit details for approval to the council, and those details will be available on our website for publication.
Thank you.
Can I ask you, in terms of the previous experience from the extension that we had of flooding, and you have put it in some in your report that there will be a proper drainage study, and the flood authorities are happy on page 28. But there is a concern from the residents, as well as something that I've personally experienced going on the extended part of that when the flooding was very serious, and that was not dealt at that stage, at an earlier stage. Obviously, it's been done now. Now, can we see that will not be the same what we experienced in the last few months or so?
Chair, if I can assist. Conditions 13, 14, 15 and 16 in the report deal with flooding and drainage. So there's a series of technical conditions that require further details to be submitted for approval. And of course, we would be trying to ensure that there is no increased risk of flooding arising from these proposals.
just my concern really, the bereaved families were, including myself, were very concerned when they were visiting the graveyards, the amount of water and all that, and they had to, they really were, people were with the buckets and trying to clear that area. So I would like that would be before, because this will be 2 or 3 times bigger site than the previous one. Yeah.
Thank you, Joe. It's a clarification. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Wim, for your detailed explanation of your proposal. On page 19, paragraph 8, in the second line, it says the existing public right-of-way would be rerouted as a part of the proposal. Though this would be subject to a separate process. In the easement you talk about here, but in the slides, you showed that the existing easement will be finished, and then you pointed out a new easement. And here you said that would be a separate matter, which will be which will be separately a process. So could you clarify, so what is meant by all this?
Yes, in terms of rights of way, it's not necessarily a planning issue. So I can only guide you in terms of my familiarity with it. Toby Malloy might be able to say a bit more to help. But in terms of planning, my understanding is that a new right of way cannot be designated until planning permission is granted. So if planning permission is granted today, then a separate process will start in terms of diverting the new right of way. I don't know if Toby wants to come in here, Chair.
I'm happy to come in if that's okay. So the right of way we consulted on in our public consultation in 2020, 2021, the majority of people weren't interested in responding about the right of way, but the next majority felt it was best that we moved the right of way to the side of the site, which is why we've developed the scheme the way it is. It would need to go through a formal Section 257 application. It takes between 6 to 12 months, depending on the complexity of it. And we would seek to divert the path, but retain the path in its existing location till the diversion is done. So it's always accessible to the public. So that's a separate process we have to go through, and we won't be able to touch or move the path until that permission is in place.
There are all sorts of complicated regulations about diverting public rights of way, and it will certainly have to be, for example, it has to be the diverted route has to be as commodious, is the word the regulations use, as the existing route. And the diversion will have to be approved by the Council's Administration and Regulation Committee. And if there are objections, it may have to go to Magistrates Court for approval. But you can't just divert public rights of way willy-nilly. It has to go through that process. And it's nothing to do with planning. It won't involve Sonny or his department at all.
I see I'm feeling pretty hot up here. Is anybody else? Because there should be some air flowing through. I think ventilation is one of the keys of we'll see how it goes anyway. Turn it off. Okay, we'll go now on to the objectors and the applicants. And I've got Councillor David Wynne, and I've also got Lionel Shaw and Caroline Shaw. Are you here? Do you want to come forward to a microphone? Yeah, that's right. You've got up to 5 minutes, and then members may wish to ask questions. Ready when you are.
Just before I actually start, could I just answer the councillor's question that he put to your council?
No, you do that within your 5 minutes. Okay. No, whatever you want to say, that's your 5 minutes, not mine.
Okay, it's just the answer was incorrect.
Yeah.
So I'm Lionel Shaw. I'm the farmer who is the tenant at Manor Farm, and I farm the land in Butterfield Green Road. Our objections are as follows. The relocation of the right-of-way. We have issues over the proposed location of the footpath, which concerns us both from a security and a trespass perspective. The bringing of the right-of-the-way nearer to the farm buildings, Swedish Cottage and Manor Farm Cottage, will present a detrimental impact on the safety and quiet enjoyment of our farm and these properties. Regarding ownership and sequential test, the report states that a sequential test has been undertaken, but this is not available online. The summary of the sequential test identifies land is in private ownership, paragraph 24. Whilst this is a correct statement, it does not inform you that it is subject to a multi-generational agricultural tenancy to my family. The proposal would result in the landlord serving notice on us to quit the land. The National Planning Policy Framework seeks to support a prosperous rural economy. Planning policies and decisions should enable the development and diversification of agricultural and other land-based rural businesses. The proposal will detrimentally impact on our business. Many years ago, we diversified our farm business to provide a livery business which generates supplementary income to our agricultural business. Even without planning being granted, we have witnessed the proposal blighting this business, and several of our long-standing liveries have left us and we're not able to replace them currently. Secondly, the land take will economically and operationally affect our farming business. With regard to the highways, the transport statement was undertaken using raw data collected from a traffic survey over 1 week from Wednesday the 19th to Tuesday the 25th of May. It is important to note that it was only 2 days before the survey commenced that the government sought to ease the restrictions on people meeting, and gatherings of more than 30 people were still illegal. The assessment of the vehicles visiting the site only deals with Monday to Friday and excludes the weekend. It is assumed that this is because the crematorium does not host services at the weekend. This is a flawed assessment, as we have witnessed that the majority of vehicles visiting and exiting the site are mourners, especially those that have been buried or visiting people that have been buried in recent years, and they tend to visit at weekends, evenings and holidays. No buildings are proposed on the site in question, and therefore a more realistic assessment would be the number of mourners who visit their loved ones post-burial. This data is included within Appendix D of the statement, wherein it records that 1,116 vehicle movements took place on the Saturday and 986 on the Sunday. And please take note that this was at a time when restrictions were in place. On Christmas Day this year, I witnessed more than 200 cars arriving at the site within 1 hour. There were already 50 cars within the cemetery. The width of Butterfield Green Road does not serve as a suitable access road to the proposed site, which is demonstrated by the proposal wishing to develop 4 passing bays along its length. Whilst it is proposed that double yellow lines would be painted in these bays to prevent people parking there, this is already the case at the entrance to the current cemetery, and it does not prevent people parking in that location. There is no enforcement. The parking issue will only be exacerbated if a new burial ground with a capacity of 8,200 is permitted, with only 29 car parking spaces. It's a fantasy to believe that mourners and visitors will park in the existing site and walk through to the new site. Not only is the use of Butterfield Green Road as access to the site dangerous from a highways perspective, but it will severely hamper us from accessing or leaving our farms at Manor Farm and Whitehill Farm with tractors and agricultural machinery. And this is not only during the operational hours of the site, but also outside these hours, and this is where the visitor numbers is so important. This will seriously impact on our business and our mental health. The proposal should not be allowed on the basis of national planning policy, and the development should be refused on highways grounds, as there would be an unacceptable impact on the highway safety, along with the cumulative impact on the volume of traffic that is using what is a country lane. Butterfield Green Road is a no-through road. We have no alternative access than to use Butterfield Green Road for all of our business. Yeah, finally, without prejudice, if the committee are minded to support the application, please seek to defer the decision until a realistic highway data has been collected in these current, more normal times, so that an accurate decision can be made and a safe alternative vehicle access route to the site can be determined. We implore you to refuse this application.
Thank you, Chair. Don't know quite how to start on this. As a local councillor for Stopsley, I feel that the residents of that part of Stopsley are just being ridden roughshod by this council. They have suffered from Butterfield Green going from a technology park to a complete industrial estate. I'm still dealing with issues to do with noise blight for the cottages on Butterfield Green Road. The way that the traffic moves up and down Butterfield Green Road is not going to be fixed by an extra little bay, and certainly not by some yellow lines. I have to say that it's very difficult when I read this report to have any view other than the fact that there is a level of arrogance of the way that residents are being treated. All of their complaints have been dismissed, usually within this report, with one single line that says this has been dealt with previously in the body of the report. It's not the case. I totally echo what was just said by the objector. The number of spaces that are being allowed on the new proposed cemetery site are just totally inadequate. it says in one part of the report there's no access other than the road. Actually, there's a footpath in the original drawings, I don't know if they're still there, by foot from the existing cemetery site through to the new one. That's not going to work. If you've got somebody who's disabled, that's not going to work. Many of the Muslim funerals, I understand, will go straight to burial site, but the Christian ones are most likely to use the facilities that are on the existing site, and there's no proper access way. So you have to come back out of the existing site, back up Butterfield Green Road onto that site. Many of the parking spaces are still going to be filled up with mourners. You get a new funeral come, it's going to be complete chaos. It's said that there have been lots of different alternative sites considered. I have to say I haven't been able to find the proper results of the survey to remind myself. I remember having seen it once, but I'm damned if I can find it now. I would like to have gone back to see what those sites were. There's an obvious site, and I know that there are difficulties concerning the ownership, which are immediately adjacent to the existing cemetery and crematorium site. That would have been much more suitable. It would have a dual benefit, not least of which would be the fact that it's right by it, so the access issues would be diminished. It also coincidentally might help with some of the noise blight that is currently still an ongoing problem. I think overall, and I don't want to give any impression of this being any form of NIMBYism. I know that we need additional burial sites within Luton, and I know that the burial sites here at Butterfield Green are going to run out very soon. But this is not the right way to expand it. It's not the right way to treat the residents here. Now, also in the report, there's many references to conditions which are going to be raised. I would just like to remind members of this committee the discussions we've had previously about Luton Borough Council, who's the applicant in this case, its track record on actually obeying its own planning conditions. We've had that discussion in respect of places like Inspire. We really have got to look at this whole thing again. It is an expansion which is done in the wrong way. And any report like this that actually suggests that we're going to also do some development work on this site, which is going to improve the state of the land from a countryside perspective, that's just not true. The truth is, this is going to be an expansion which the town needs in the wrong place, done in the wrong way. And I would ask that this committee actually consider the whole thing and say, let's think again, let's get something which is a better proposal, not this one. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Can I now ask the applicant of questions by any specific questions by members to Councillor David Wynne? Okay, now I'll ask Toby Malloy, representing the applicants, and you've heard some of the comments that have been raised, and if you want to answer some of those, please.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to speak tonight. I am Toby Malloy, the Project Design and Delivery Manager in Property and Infrastructure at the Council. Just a couple of quick points following on from some of the comments raised for the committee. The ownership of the land is not a planning consideration, and neither are potential other sites. So the committee are asked to consider the site and the proposals that are in front of them today. Our proposed development is for 8,200 burial spaces in a new cemetery at the land to the west of Butterfield Green Road. The site does sit within Greenbelt and an area of great landscape value, but neither of these designations totally discount the development of cemeteries. But we do need to be very thoughtful and careful in the way they are considered and designed. So we've approached this design to be as sympathetic to its rural location as possible, considering its neighbours and the ecological potential of the site. whilst consulting with the neighbours and the wider public on the most appropriate and balanced solution to meet the town's needs. The project may have more impacts locally, but it must be stressed it will be an important community asset for the town. The overall design has been consciously considered around its context. It limits the amount of road and hard landscaping, but also wraps that road in a densely covered planting band of trees, shrubs and flowers. And this creates a concealed and tranquil core to the cemetery as visitors attend, but limits the disruptions to other mourners and the neighbours of the site. The burial zones are then laid out in 9 separate areas. Each zone is planted around its perimeter to help create a more intimate scale of burial and to limit the visual impact of too many graves together. These planted bands also help with the proposed drainage strategy. Each zone is drained into a shallow ditch, which is then planted to help collect surface water. This water then flows to 2 ponds where a borehole helps the water percolate away in a sustainable fashion and helps create more tranquil water features. The borehole is required to limit the risk of water ponding on site on the heavy clay soils that are present in this part of the town. The proposal will also help limit the amount of site runoff by collecting and controlling the surface water within the site. The rest of the site has also been considered to try and improve the ecology of the area. Naturally, the development causes some loss. We're taking away a bit of hedgerow to create access. We're removing a lot of the grassland for graves. However, much of the site is of low value ecologically, and compensatory measures have been added to link and improve existing key features such as Stopsley Commons Country Wildlife Site and the Oozy Hill District Wildlife Site. So to help this, we're putting in an 8-metre widening of the hedge along the perimeter to help link and improve the ecological connections between these 2 areas. You should be able to see on the in-plan that there's lots of enhancements with wildflowers, trees and shrubs. And this is significant, and it's done in a way to help create ecological value and improve the visual setting. We've undertaken various surveys and nothing that is protected or insurmountable has been recorded by our ecologists, and the council's ecologist has been consulted throughout and has been supportive and complementary of the measures we've put forward. Further surveys are required and conditioned, and we'll work with the council's ecologist to see those through. The enhancements also include mitigation to the neighbouring residents. We keep the main burial areas away from houses, use planting to help screen the visual impact, place natural burial plots closer to homes to reduce that visual impact of seeing graves from your windows. We've also worked with the landowner and the tenant to mitigate the impact on the farm. We've provided access routes to existing fields. We've modified the extent in which we are undertaking our works to keep it further away from the farmhouse, and considered solutions along Butterfield Green Road to limit the impact on the highway network and agricultural vehicle movements. Access to the site is taken from the most southerly point off Butterfield Green Road, and this is to reduce the distance cars travel from Hitchin Road to the site. It's also very centrally located, provides 28 formal parking spaces and a potential 25 informal ones.
Can I ask you to sum up now, please?
Yes, sir. So pre-pandemic, we were burying around 350 people per annum. That's one a day on average. This gives a 23-year capacity. Since COVID, the death rate's been higher, but it's also made it more difficult to predict how long this capacity will be. We've had 589 in 2020 and 569 in 21. So the final burial, the capacity is going to depend on what the burial rate is going forward. We did do a public consultation, and 386 out of 729 people supported the location for this. We think it's the right place to do it in a sustainable way to link in with the existing facilities rather than duplicating things elsewhere in the town. We do have the link across to enable people to walk to the burial site as well, which we believe is important to keep families, loved ones as close as possible to each other. So in conclusion, we believe we've proposed a policy compliance scheme that has addressed its key site constraints as sensitively as possible and compensated for the impact and losses. Luton is a small borough, and we feel the proposal is well located from a sustainability perspective and helps provide Lutonians with a key, tranquil, reflective and appropriate place for various faiths and religions for burials and mourning. Thank you for your time and opportunity to present, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions to the applicant? Councillor Hussain.
Can I just clarify, and I think you said that, and for members to be very clear, in terms of the ownership of the land is not a planning issue, is that correct?
Stephen may want to answer that one, but as far as I understand, you can apply for planning permission on anyone's land as long as you serve them notice.
Yeah, it's Stephen Sparshot, planning solicitor. Agreed. The ownership of the land isn't relevant, but obviously whatever use of that land is being used at that time is relevant. Thank you.
Yeah, and the second question really is there was well, Councillor Wynne said earlier on in terms of alternative sites, were they considered? Were there any other place that was proposed or anything, or were they looked at?
We looked at around 25 sites on a desktop study to see where was appropriate. And I think the second place would have been pretty unpalatable because from memory it was Stockwood Park. So this was the clear winner, and we looked at it against various criteria. But I don't think that's a planning consideration for today, in my view.
Yeah, we can only determine what's in front of us tonight. Councillor Kershid.
Thank you, Chair. From the proposal, I can see you talk about ecology, biodiversity, and drainage contamination. You touched basically all the relevant issues, but you've not talked about climate change. How are you going to was sort of are you going to use the renewable energy? What sorts of measure are you going to take in order to achieve net zero carbon emissions?
The facility itself uses very little energy, and predominant uses is in lighting at night, and we are proposing to use very low energy LED lights with sensors that mean the lights aren't on if the facility isn't open and being used. So it's designed to use as little energy as possible, but because of its location and being rural, we haven't added in any renewable technology or anything like that to support it, as we felt it would be conflicts too much with its rural location and character.
Actually, I was looking in terms of plantation, that whether you've considered planting more trees, so it will help the environment as well.
We've planted quite a lot of trees on the site already, but it is a balance between the amount of trees versus the amount of burial space we create. We could do 4,000 graves and plant half the site up in trees, but we'd only be looking for a site again to expand in half the time. So we think we've proposed a sort of fair and reasonable approach between planting and burial space. If anything, we've kept increasing the amount of green space to help compensate for the ecological loss on other parts of the site.
Thank you, Chair.
Any further questions by members? Any comments? Councillor Franks, Councillor Donlan, and Councillor Hussain.
There are a number of issues about this, aren't there, really? I think the first thing I want to say is I was not encouraged by being told that the drainage measures are intended to ensure that there is no deterioration in the flooding of the area. I would have thought the experience of the last few years in the existing burial ground would suggest that what we really ought to be doing is making sure that there is a very considerable improvement in the drainage, not just to make sure the flooding doesn't get any worse, but to make sure that it doesn't happen at all on the new site. I'm not convinced that the number of parking places is sufficient. It's all very well looking at the number of parking places you think you may need for a funeral. Well, that's hard enough to predict because the numbers will vary massively. Some Muslim funerals attract lots more, some traveller funerals attract lots and lots more. I guess you can't cater for the extremes, but I'm not convinced that the 20 odd parking places that are proposed here are going to be sufficient for most funerals, given that you're quite possibly going to have one funeral arriving at the same time as the previous one is leaving. And of course, there's another parking issue which is much less predictable and much more difficult to control, and that's people visiting existing graves. They're more likely to come in the evenings and at weekends, but the point is they are not predictable and they are very difficult to control. I'm just not convinced the number of parking places is sufficient. The issue raised by Councillor Wynne of particularly Christian burials where there may well be a need to use the chapel on the existing burial site. I accept that that probably won't happen with Muslim burials because they will tend to have done their ceremonial stuff before they arrive at the cemetery, whereas Christians quite often don't. So I don't see any obvious way in which a sensible manoeuvre into the chapel on the old site and out of the chapel on the old site and into the burial ground on the new site is going to be made to work. I'm sure it can be made to work, but I'd like to know how before I put my hand up and vote for this. So I guess in the end, I'm going to suggest that you're going to love me for this, the application should be deferred in order to seek more information on how the parking is going to be managed, how you're seriously going to prevent parking in Butterfield Green Road and blocking this very narrow road, how you're going to facilitate moving the funeral party from the chapel on the existing burial ground to the new one for the actual burial. I just think we need to know a lot more about how these things are going to work before we can seriously vote for it.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just say in terms of the comment, first and foremost is what is being proposed. I will strongly oppose that, and I'll give the reasons for that. Is even Councillor Frank, Councillor Wynne, and every councillor in this room knows we've got a very little space left now for the burial. Somebody who does go there every day for personal reason cannot see that there is not much land left there for the burial now. So deferring it is not going to bring that solution, and neither does anybody wish that for religious or other reason where people wish to bury their loved ones as quickly as possible, that with delaying it would benefit the bereaved families. So that is one part of it. So I would hope that my colleagues all of us will oppose that. The second one is in terms of the traffic, even with the Christian one in the chapel, which, you know, I've only recently attended a very dear friend's funeral. People do park in those car parking, you know, the parking spaces, and they are sufficient parking spaces in terms near the both chapels. So I can't see, you know, the parking can be issue in terms of it, and people do not then immediately get into their cars and will be driving to the site, knowing that there are only a small number of parking spaces. So I think delaying is not the answer. I'll be strongly supporting the officer's recommendation because the need is very urgent and we can't delay it any further, because the last thing we want to do is to have the bodies sitting into either the hospital or the funeral director's place. So I would ask the colleagues to support the recommendation of the officers and accepting that we need this as urgently as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Well, I'm in two minds because we do need more burial spaces, but we've heard from people who live near the site who challenge what is said about the traffic and about the fact that obviously at weekends, I agree, I think there will be more visitors. And I think most of us here have been to funerals where you've got one funeral coming out at the back and another one waiting to go in. And I am immensely concerned about parking and immensely concerned about how it's going to be seamless and a transition from the chapel possibly over to the burial plot, with people who are going to be absolutely distraught and distressed. And I was really in two minds, really sort of erring towards opposing it. And then when Councillor Frank suggested deferring, I thought that was a good idea in order to obtain more information. So I would support deferring this to find out a little bit more about how it's going to work, because we've got a duty to the residents of Luton. We do need burial plots, but we also need to ensure at the darkest times when people are sort of bereft and in emotional turmoil, but we can try and make burying their loved ones as difficult to say, but as the least difficult way that we can actually achieve that. And I feel that we do need more information. If there isn't a consensus for a deferment, then I don't think I can't support this. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. I'm in two minds, but I think I will vote for this as has been recommended. My worry is about how, when I joined the council and joined this committee, one of the things that keeps coming up was the Butterfield area designated as a business area. And I think, to me, that was like the Luton version of Silicon Valley. Since 2015, I've been here. Gradually, I think the idea of there being a Silicon Valley is been put away. And I think the council needs to think really hard about this, whether it wants the Silicon Valley or it wants a shed somewhere in the Butterfield area. And I think that's my main concern. There's no doubt in my mind that there's an urgency of having a burial place. There's no doubt in my mind. But I think the councils need to do more options appraisal and stop using that part of the land as somewhere that they can just do anything at all without having in mind why we have there as our Silicon Valley. So my plea to the council is make sure that whatever you've designated as a business center or business area, you have to be mindful. You have people doing businesses, and don't turn into a shed or anything you see that can be dumped there. And I think that's something that the council needs to really think about. If there's any other applications coming here, I think you have to be mindful that the residents in those areas needs to have their businesses, and what has been said to them not be changed at a whim without having a deep thought about it. So, Chair, thank you very much. That's my comment.
Any further comments? I think I just want to say that there is a clear and identifiable need for a cemetery, no doubt about it. And it probably should be next to the existing cemetery. I can't see how it should be anywhere else. There is the practicalities. There are funerals, and goodness knows I've been to a few this year. And there's also access to visitors at other times. And I just wonder if the road capacity to this actual development, cemetery development, is sufficient. Because I think I've heard some comments tonight that people do drive to the cemetery. It's out of town. It's managed quite well at the moment because of the traffic light system and the parking provision that's there. But I say, when you go to visit this new part of the cemetery, are you expected to walk from the chapel down to the new cemetery? I don't know. There just seems to be some implications as regards traffic. And we all, there is a need for the cemetery, but it's the practicalities of what will actually happen at the time of funerals and burials. As you say, you can't really enforce it in the current cemetery we've got at the moment, although it does work really well. Sonny, did you want to come in?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just mopping up on a few comments that members made. I suppose the comment about the technology park, just to clarify, this doesn't involve the employment area at all. This is a proposal for burial use on former agricultural land. That's all we're considering. There's nothing else about previous promises of high-tech technology moving into the local area or not. So that's not part of what we're being asked to consider tonight. Other comments, flood risk. Yes, I think it would be useful if we could reduce the risk of flood risk as has happened in the past within this local area. But unfortunately, the planning system doesn't allow for us to do that. We can only assess and require that the impacts arising from what's being proposed is mitigated. So we can only look at this site, what's being proposed, and mitigating against what they're proposing. So as long as the situation in terms of flood risk isn't made any worse, which is what we're trying to do, trying to secure through the conditions we've recommended, that's as far as the planning process can take us. We couldn't ask the applicant to rectify the wider problems, and it's acknowledged that there must be wider problems on this site and beyond. In terms of transport, I would stress that there are conditions recommended that deal with some of these issues, particularly in terms of parking, conditions 30 and 31, which requires the applicant to monitor the site and provide regular reports in terms of the parking situation. And these need to be submitted to the council, and officers can then review how to mitigate against any additional worsening impacts, such that there shouldn't be ongoing problems. In terms of deferment, I'm unclear as to what additional information we can provide if the item was deferred today. If there was any additional information, it would have been provided already. So I'm unclear what else we can offer members before they decide to make a decision.
Can I just ask our highways officer to come in? You've heard lots of members and members of the public speak about parking and traffic. What's your view on this application?
It's an interesting one to evaluate because it is hard to judge against normal set standards, because traffic movements and so on are unusual, I suppose, for persons visiting cemeteries. Further to what Sonny's just said, we have asked also for safety audits to be undertaken for the design for the parking passing places on the approach to the cemetery and the crossing point. So there's still a safety audit process to go through, and they will identify problems and mitigation required to resolve those problems. So it may be that there are further works required to the highway identified by those audits, which may address some of the issues.
So it's a bit of a crystal ball you're looking into. Am I right?
To a degree, I think it's the only single track road in Luton. Well, we've got Ely Way as well, which is a bit different. But it's an unusual site for Luton, but that's partly why the conditions have been written the way they are, to try and address some of these issues, because we're not sure exactly how it will develop. Yeah. So the safety audit is probably a fairly critical process.
To try and resolve any issues
before,
rather than retrospectively.
Yes.
David, you want to say?
Yes, thank you, Chair. In terms of response from Sunny, I mean, for me, I think we have to ask the question, is this place still our Silicon Valley? That's number one. And we can't say, oh, we should have to look at this in terms of in silos. That's like a stuff way approach of drip, 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 and the place is going to look like a shed. And for me, I'm asking to look at the long-term effect of what you do. Because we come here and we see applications and it's been taken away. And I think you need to think long and hard. Yes, this is about this one, but I'm asking as a general comment, is this still our Silicon Valley? That's a question to you.
Well, that's not really a relevant question, David, tonight. That's a broader issue. We're dealing with a cemetery extension.
Yeah, that's now broader.
If you've got other issues about, Silicon Valley, I mean, we can have, wait for Elon Musk just to invest in Butterfield Green. But I mean, that's not going to happen in the near future. I hope it does, but it doesn't look like it.
Yeah, thank you. Just to correct one issue, the Butterfield Green is not the only single carriageway, single width road in Luton. I lived in one for 22 years, and there are several around the town. Essentially, in order that Sonny can understand what I'm asking for deferral so that the officers and the applicant in particular can come back with more information on how they're going to manage the parking, with some evidence to support their claim that their proposed number of parking places is sufficient, willing to look at the evidence, and how they're going to manage moving funeral parties from the chapel on the old site to a burial plot on the new site. Those are key issues. They're management issues, and I would like to understand how they're going to be dealt with. I hope that helps.
Are there any further? Sonny?
Yes, Toby Malloy, I think, wants to add some comments and maybe assist, Chair.
If it's, I mean, he's had his 5 minutes. I just want to be fair to the objectors as well. If it's specific to the questions that have been asked, I will allow it, but I don't want a statement, please.
Yeah, it's specific to the questions being asked. In terms of traffic movements to the site, 75 to 85% of the existing traffic movements are for cremations. So the high number of people that visit the existing Vale aren't going to be using the burial site. In terms of moving a coffin from an existing chapel to this site, it's no different to a Christian having their service at Stopsley Church by the junior school and it being driven to this site to be buried. The coffin gets put in the hearse and moved to the location where it's going to be buried on the site and then carried to its final resting place. I don't think we're creating anything new with doing that. The number of parking spaces on site, you asked for some more evidence. It is a bit of a tricky one to estimate because it's not a common parking situation like an office block or a housing estate where there's hard and fast facts about the amount of spaces. But we've based it on a similar amount of parking that's at the existing sites, purposely linked the two sites together and created the most direct walking route as possible, and been working with the team at the Vale to discuss how that will be managed with funeral directors to try and keep existing cars parked in the bigger car parks on the Vale and ask people to walk across. People with limited mobility or disabilities would be obviously encouraged to drive round rather than make the walk, but it's about 380 metres from the existing car park to the new site. So we just tried to get that balance between, we don't want to build a multi-storey car park or 200 car parking spaces over there because that would ruin the rural character. It's about getting the balance of the right amount of parking spaces for it to operate and utilise some of the existing facilities to support that.
At about half a mile in old money, you did 380 metres.
Quarter of a mile.
Quarter of a mile.
No.
380 metres. It's. I think it's nearer to half a mile.
It is.
Yeah. Anyway, it's a long walk for some. Comments? Any further comments? Councillor Franks, you had a proposal.
Yeah, if you want to go over it again, I move that the application be deferred for the applicant to come up with some evidence that the number of parking places actually is sufficient, at how they're going to manage the parking, and particularly how they're going to manage the threat of parking within Butterfield Green Road itself, and how they're going to manage the manoeuvre from the chapel on the old site to the burial plot on the new site.
Okay, so we'll go to the vote now. Eunice, call out individually. So it's for deferral.
If I start with Councillor Anthony.
Against.
Councillor Ali.
For.
Councillor Bridget.
For.
Councillor Donovan.
Just confirming we're voting for deferring the matter.
Yes.
Yes, I'm for it. Thank you.
For deferral, please. Thank you. Councillor Franks.
For.
Councillor A. Hussain.
He's declared an interest and left.
Councillor M. Hussain.
Against.
Councillor Roach.
No.
Councillor Kushid. Against. Councillor Muslim.
Against.
And Councillor Taylor.
Against.
So we have what against is 5 against, 4 deferral, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4.
So that the deferral is lost. So we go to the substantive recommendation now. So it's to approve, subject to the conditions. And once again, please, Eunice.
For approval.
For.
For.
Against.
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 For.
For.
For. Do you keep switching it off, Bert? All right, yeah, I'll let you off. Okay, so we go on to King. Yeah. Councillor Abbas, is he outside? Do you want him to come in before this one?
Chairman, it's Stephen Sparshaw, if I may. I, for one, didn't hear what the final vote was on that. I'm not sure if there are other people online that might have been in the same position. So could you clarify what the actual final?
It was 6 for the recommendation to approve and 3 against the recommendation.
Thank you.
You want to? Okay, can we all come together, please? There's a few missing. Miss Fugit. All members back. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's it. I think all members are back. So we'll go on to King. Hello over in the corner, please. We're starting. Right. We'll go on to agenda item 10, King's House, page 181. And Nyla, are you online?
Yeah, I'm online. Good evening, everyone. This application relates to King House, King Street and George Street West. Next slide, please. The application is subject to a verbal update seeking amendments to the wording of paragraph 2, clause 3 of the recommendation on page 181 to include the words and/or add after the words minor alterations. Sandra, can you go next slide, please? The application site is a 1970s office building which fronts onto King Street and with its rear elevation fronting George Street West. Its height ranges from 2 to 7 stories. It's one of the tallest buildings in this stretch of the town centre. The site is located within the town centre conservation area and the secondary shopping centre frontage. Next slide. The proposal is seeking 3-story front extension along the King Street frontage, part 3 to 6-story rear extension along the George Street West frontage, additional story to provide 9 flats, additional office and commercial accommodation, and external alterations to the appearance of the building fronting King Street. In terms of the principle of the development, this is considered acceptable as set out in paragraph 17 to 23 of the report, pages 186 to 187. The proposed residential accommodation in terms of its mix provides over 75% family accommodation, which contributes towards meeting the housing needs of the borough. The proposal is also seeking to extend and modernize the existing office accommodation within the building, which will help provide much needed modern office space within the town centre. The proposal ensures that the commercial uses are retained on the ground floor, maintaining the character and character of the secondary shopping frontage. In terms of design, in terms of the design and the impact of the development on the character of the appearance of the conservation area, the existing building, as shown by the earlier photographs, is of poor design and appearance and makes little contributions to the appearance and character of the town centre conservation area. As discussed in paragraphs 27 to 33 of the report on pages 188 to 189, the proposal is seeking a series of infill extensions to the front and rear of the building, which are shown on this slide, which not only reinstate the historic building line on both frontages, but also remove some of the void spaces, ensuring a more continuous building line which relates better to the surrounding built form. In terms of the upward extension, whilst this does add to the height and the prominence of the existing building, given the fact that it will be set back and uses large, next slide, please. Set back and uses large glazing sections, helps to break up the visual promise of the building. The arch detailing around the windows gives a building a balanced and a symmetrical appearance. This, in addition to the proposed changes to the front facade involving the use of the red brick and windows and arches, not only improves the overall appearance of the existing building, but also the surrounding town centre conservation area. Next slide, please. Proposes also seeking to seeking rear extensions and also a graffiti wall to the rear elevation of the existing flat roof addition located on the George Street West frontage to provide more interest in this bland elevation, which introduces a new visual feature within the area, and to ensure that this does not harm the appearance of the conservation area. A suitably worded condition is to be imposed, seeking further details of the graffiti wall, as well as details of the long-term maintenance of this wall. In summary, the proposed modifications sought as part of this proposal are considered overall to improve the character and appearance of the town centre conservation area. The site is surrounded on both frontages mainly by commercial premises, and owing to the location of the proposed extensions and their relationship with the neighbouring buildings, no adverse impact anticipated on the visual amenities of the adjoining occupiers. The intensification of use of the site will generate additional noise and disturbance, but again, given the town centre location, the impact is not considered to be harmful. No representations have been received from any of the adjoining occupiers in relation to the scheme. In terms of the living environment, as discussed for future residents, as discussed in paragraph 35 to 39, pages 190 to 191 of the report, the scheme creates acceptable living environment for the future occupiers of these flats. Parking, the proposal provides no off-street parking, but does provide 14 cycle spaces for the residential element and 24 cycle spaces for the commercial use. The lack of parking in this case can be justified on the basis that the site is within the town centre, which has excellent local and national transport links. To conclude, it is considered that the development not only provides much needed family housing and modern office space, but also improves the appearance of the original building, enhancing the town centre conservation area. On that basis, a conditional approval is recommended.
Thanks, Nyla. Can I just ask how a graffiti wall improves the character and appearance of the area?
It just adds to it, doesn't it? At the moment, you've got a very bland frontage, nothing but a wall, and if something is put on there, that's, obviously we condition it, we're going to look at the content of it, it will just give it a little bit more interest than what's there at the moment, which is just a blank wall.
I think it's subjective anyway. Councillor Abbas.
Design is always subjective.
And what's behind this graffiti wall in that block?
That's an existing office accommodation.
Existing office accommodation. So is that graffiti wall going to have any windows or not? Because that diagram does not show no windows on either side.
No, but that's an existing situation. That's the wall there. I don't know if the photographs. Sandra, can you go back to the photographs, please? The next. Yeah, it's the wall. It doesn't show that wall well. I'll have to just quickly let me check my pictures. I did take some pictures of that. Okay. Google Maps.
Okay, so looking at
There
that,
are windows. I think there are windows on either, not the flank that's facing, but they probably haven't shown it. But there are windows in either side, but not that elevation where they've shown the graffiti wall.
okay, and looking at your George Street West frontage, going to my second question, which I was going to ask, yeah, that white van there now parked there, or a car, whatever it is, I can't see from here properly either, but is there access? But under your diagrams for this application, you've covered that access. So how are people going to get into those blocks from the new development?
The access for the office will be from the front. They've shown a front area where all the
So front is King Street then?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I'll come back to the rest of the questions.
Yeah, I won't detain you very long on this. I've looked at this building many times, and I find it absolutely impossible to imagine anything at all that you could do to the exterior of it that wouldn't improve it. So I'm going to put my hands up and vote for this.
Even the graffiti.
Even the graffiti. It's impossible not to improve.
I can't wait to see it. Honestly, can't wait to see it. Do you had another question? Or a comment now? I think no more questions.
Okay, so looking at that picture, then I'll go back. So that was my question on that picture, yeah? Okay, so that is King Street, yeah? I believe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, and the graffiti
Let me just
is literally behind this building on George Street West, I believe, not King Street.
Yeah, it's on George Street West frontage.
And what about the waste collection and access and the entrance to these apartments? So whereabouts is that?
They're all coming from the King Street frontage.
Okay.
Comment, Chair. I think I agree with Councillor Franks on that. Anything would improve the size of the building. And as regards to the graffiti artist, I think, Chair, you need to look at sometime in your own ward. Is where we have a fantastic graffiti artist who have done a fantastic job near the Market Square. We can encourage those young people to come down and do that in the King Street, because they have done a really marvelous job and we're really impressed. And these are 12, 13 years old.
And the underpass in Cumberland Street as well, which has been there
Yes.
many years. But yeah,
Thank you.
I think I shouldn't have brought it up now. That's Kershid.
Thank you, Chair. I think it will add, some sort of character to the existing place. And as I can see, there's a trees, there's a green shrubs, and if they are proposing that sort of thing, and it looks good and promising, to be honest, from the pictures, and I believe, Naila, you said that there are provision for the car parking as well.
No, it's cycle spaces.
Okay, just for the cycles only. There's no car. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a town centre location.
Thank you.
Location. Any further comments? No further comments, and it's recommended for approval. So we'll go to the vote. Same? Yeah. Well, I'll move approval then. You second it, just to make it formal. We'll go to the vote now.
Councillor Agley,
For.
Councillor Ali,
For.
Councillor Bridget,
For.
Councillor Donnellan,
For.
Councillor Franks,
For.
Councillor Abbas Hussain,
For.
Councillor M. Hussain,
For.
Councillor Kashid,
For.
Councillor Masood,
For.
and Chair Councillor Taylor.
For.
That's the majority, Chair.
Carried. We'll go on to the Limbury Mead service station.
Thank you, Chair. Members, this is item 11, which is on page 201 to 228 of the agenda. First slide. So this site has no recent planning history, but it was previously used as a petrol filling station, which ceased in the 1980s. Then it became a car sales site in the 1990s. And more recently, it's been used for vehicular testing and servicing. And most of the site is very dilapidated and does cause issues of noise disturbance, trespass, and there's been incidences of arson as well. Next slide. The proposal before you is for the demolition of the existing buildings to make way for 16 new dwellings. This includes 12 three-bedroom dwelling houses, 2 two-bedroom flats, and 2 one-bedroom flats. If we go on to the next slide, the key issues, principle of development, and loss of existing use. The existing use at the site consists of an MOT service station and storage depot. These uses generate a modest level of employment compared to the overall scale of the site. However, as I've already mentioned, it's currently largely vacant and dilapidated, and Bedfordshire Fire and Rescue are often called to this site. The prevailing uses would be considered inappropriate to redevelop for further commercial use, and therefore it's considered that the proposal to provide housing, which officers consider to be of a very good design, very good dwelling mix, and will provide some affordable housing as well, is sufficient for officers to recommend that planning permission is granted, subject to conditions and completion of a legal agreement. Thank you.
So you can have up to 5 minutes to speak on behalf.
Thank you, Chair. I'm the agent on the application representing the applicant and the application at Limbury Mead service station, which you'll be familiar with. As you know, the application seeks consent for the demolition of the vehicular servicing garage and industrial storage on site and the erection of 16 dwellings. Associated with this, the reopening of the existing access to Icknield Way, provision of car parking and cycle storage, and significant landscaping management and enhancement. We had a very positive process of engagement over the duration of the application to reach this stage. Worked particularly well together with Graham to decide the appropriate dwelling mix, which would deliver real positive benefit for local families through the provision of 12 three-bed homes, 2 two-bedroom flats, and 2 one-bedroom flats. The reason for today is very simple. It's the most important thing that we must keep in mind. This application, put simply, delivers crucial housing of appropriate housing mix on a near vacant brownfield site that majorly detracts from the area's residential character. The scheme delivers public benefit on a site that currently has little value to the locality. Over the course, as Sonny mentioned, we received some correspondence from Bedfordshire Fire and Rescue Department, who strongly suggested that the application, strongly supported the application proposals. The department are currently receiving a high number of calls from local residents who are concerned with regard to noise disruption and fires being started on site. It's a significant burden on their resources. They welcome this as a long-term solution. As suggested, the current condition of the site is detracting from the local experience and does not interact well with the adjacent area of green space. There's particular benefit arising from the scheme, which occupants will be served by brilliant amenity space from a stone's throw from the proposals. Absolutely ideal for family occupancy. Through great collaboration, the scheme has been able to deliver logical and respectful residential development. It is therefore the case that this principal proposal is acceptable, because fundamentally the scheme will deliver huge public benefit and the resulting land use will be far more appropriate within the local context. The design of the proposal is in accordance with the general prevailing character of the surrounding area, which includes a blend of two-storey dwellings and bungalows. The proposed dwellings also benefit from bays, bespoke lintels, sash windows, detailed brick courses and decorative door edging, which contribute to the high quality design. Overall, it's ascertained that the scheme would constitute a significant uplift in terms of its quality and visual appearance. In terms of local policy, the scheme complies with all the aspects of relevant policies as set out by Luton Borough Council. Delivery of housing is deemed acceptable with regard to Local Policy 15 in terms of the proposed housing mix, which has been decided on to address the need for 3-bedroom family dwellings in Luton. It is asserted that the scheme in this location and the development on brownfield land, which currently detracts from the local character, is an example of sustainable development in accordance with the primary aims of national policy. We're extremely confident that the proposals tick all the relevant boxes to treat this site with the sensitivity it deserves, with a scheme that will deliver any positives. Given all of this, the benefits of the scheme, the policy context, and most importantly, the fact that it meets an unmet need in Luton, I strongly urge you to support the officer's recommendation for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions to the applicant's agent? Questions by members? Abbas?
So you say that this ticks all the boxes of our local plan. To my reading, it doesn't. No affordable housing given on this property, no S106 for education, no S106 for affordable housing either. So how does it tick all the boxes with such a major development like this? Sonny, and I'm sorry about that, Sonny, you did say that they're giving affordable housing, but apparently on page 214, paragraph 61, it clearly states they're not giving no affordable housing.
No, that correction is correct, Councillor Hussain. There is no affordable housing from the scheme. That's due to viability constraints. The applicants did submit their viability assessment, which was thoroughly scrutinised independently by the council's consultant, and we agreed that there isn't sufficient funding in this scheme to provide the policy compliant affordable housing we would require. It is noted that the developers have reduced their profit margin from national guidances. It should be between 15 to 20% profit allowed in developments. The developer reduced that profit to 10%, so taking on a greater risk. Even so, the scheme could not deliver sufficient funds to provide the affordable housing. It is a contaminated site. It has it is a brownfield site. Brownfield sites usually are more costly to bring forward for housing. What I can reassure members is that we have included a viability review mechanism in the Section 106. So at the point the scheme is developed out, we can revisit the viability situation. And if there is the ability to provide affordable housing through commuted payment and other contributions, we as a council can secure it at that stage. So despite that shortfall, the scheme is policy compliant in every other respect, apart from providing the Section 106 contributions at this stage. Thank you, Chair.
And you said the land is contaminated, but where's the actual report in this report saying that it's contaminated?
I haven't got the viability assessment here.
Doesn't mention anything about contamination, where on previous applications, we have seen that in reports that saying the land is contaminated. So
yeah, the previous historic use suggests there will be a level of contamination. So it was previously used for car repairs, MOT station. That would suggest there would be contamination on this site.
And your mechanism for the viability is at the end, at the last stage now, under your conditions.
That's something we can agree with in discussion with the applicants in terms of when the trigger occurs in terms of the review, whether that's at mid stage or closer to the end stage.
And this is of high material brick, I believe, and tile that you're using on this application, yeah?
Sorry, could you repeat?
So the design is made out of brick. There's no cladding or anything like that used.
Yeah, there is a materials condition. We are striving to ensure the highest quality of external materials in new developments that we approve in Luton. And I think the intention here is it will be brick that we will be trying to secure as an external material on this site.
Okay. Just got some doubts. Your housing development like this, working on 10% profit.
I wouldn't have thought it was a major housing development. It's only 16 properties, and it's but they got the mix is okay as far as I'm concerned. Not particularly bothered. So, Anne.
Can I just say very briefly, Chair, I think it's wonderful that there are some houses. We see so many applications for flats and yes, I fully support it. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Kershid.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a concern, actually. It's not a question. It's how it's schooling. It will create an extra burden for the existing schools. So, there's no more provision for the school. There's more. I understand that we are shortage of 17,000 houses in town, but we need to look at the provision for the school as well. So that's my concern regarding this. Thank you, Chair.
Sally, I think it's to do with the actual amount of housing, isn't it? That is.
Yeah, I think Councillor makes a very good point that it's not just affordable housing that's a priority for the council. That there is education contributions that we should be seeking to secure as well. So we are regularly in dialogue with colleagues in housing and in education to try and prioritise between the two when there are situations where both cannot be provided, which should be prioritised on which site. But obviously it's a decision for members. So if members feel that on a particular scheme where there is a shortfall, whether they would prefer the contributions that are available is made for either education or for affordable housing. So that's a decision members can make. Officers internally try and liaise and try and arrive at the best outcome for the council when we're negotiating and assessing these schemes.
Sonny, page 204, if you look at the diagram, you've got little studs going across the pathway there. What is that for? So if you look at the diagram, it says Icknield Way to the bottom corner, you've got like an archway studs, like a cut. What is that about? So if you look at the left-hand bottom corner, you got like a dotted dashes going across the road in between the first car.
Chair. Yeah, just to clarify, that's the existing access to the MOT garage there. So it's not part of the design, it's the existing access point. That's correct, yes. As part of the works, there'll be a Section 278 agreement for vehicle crossovers.
Okay. Any further comments?
Can I have the viability condition, please, added to this application?
Can we? I think, yeah.
Is it already there? If it's already there, then it's fine. Yeah. If it's not, can Sunny add it in, please? Yeah. At the end of this project.
Just to clarify, what exactly is the condition on viability required?
So if we approve, yeah, then at the end of the project, yeah, there needs to be a viability assessment done at the end stage to get our, what was the figure again? The recoup for S106 and affordable housing.
Yeah, that's already there, but we haven't agreed when the trigger will be, whether it's midpoint or towards the end. But your preference is towards the end. Okay, we'll make a note of that. This will be part of the 106 discussions and eventual agreement. Yeah. But your point is noted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry, I just would like to add on what I said previously, that, you know, what sort of impact we are looking at on our basic amenities, you know, and the facilities we have. So to be honest, I think it's a good idea to bring a revised proposal where we can see how you're supposed to address these things. You know, it's not, you know, providing the house to a family. You have to provide, you know, the health facilities, the education, and so on, you know. So, and again, with sort of congestion, we are looking at, you know, the highway report, you know, their thoughts, you know. So I think those points should be incorporated with when a proposal comes, so we can, you know, understand and give a fair suggestion or approval or whatever. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, those points are valid when it is a large development, but if 16 properties, the impact on schools and highways would be negative. Simple as that. But you'll see other applications which do take into consideration quite large sums of money for education.
Yes.
Highways.
But I think
some of them going over £2 million, but this one will generate no real contributions.
I agree with you, but the thing is that we need to take the measurements. We need to, you know, measure what sort of, because if we keep allowing the, you know, these sorts of planning, then the burden will be on the schools, the burden will be on the health side, you know, and the thing is that there must be solutions. We are creating problems rather than we're looking at the solutions.
Yeah. But the impact of services, education and highways is negligible with these 16 properties. It's as simple as that. But when you see larger applications, and there's quite a few to come, then you'll see how they can contribute massive amounts of money to education, highways, etc.
I agree, Chair.
We're not expecting, you know, I'm quite happy with the mix. 12 3-beds, which I don't think we would have got a couple of years ago. But I think in context, what we've got here is certainly, I'd have a problem with approving it.
Well, my personal view is that, you know, when we allowing these plannings, we need to look at, you know, what what sort of facilities we are going to provide to those people who are going to live in those dwellings.
Yeah,
And
when you see larger applications, you will see those conditions in there. But as far as I'm concerned, 16 properties are going to have not much impact at all. Perfectly acceptable to me. Okay. I'm going to move on now. I'm going to move the recommendation to approve. Is that seconded? Councillor Mahmood Hussain seconds. Councillor Mahmood Hussain. Okay, so we'll go to the vote now, Eunice.
I'll start with Councillor Agri.
4.
Councillor Ali.
4.
Councillor Butcher.
4.
4.
4.
4.
Councillor Hussain. 4. Councillor Kushi.
4.
Councillor Hoswit.
4.
And finally, the Chair, Councillor Taylor.
4. That was unanimous, so planning permission has been approved, subject to the conditions. We'll move on now to 32 Bank Close, page 229. And Nyla?
Yeah.
Are you still with us?
Yes, I'm still with you. Again, this application is also subject to a verbal update. Again, seeking amendments to the wording of paragraph 2, clause 3, just to include those words and / or add after the minor alterations. This application was subject of 9 neighbours being notified and 7 representations being received objecting to the scheme. The application site, Sandra, next slide. Yeah, the application site forms part of the side and rear garden of number 32 Bank Close, as well as part of a grass highway verge. The site is characterised by level differences, with the levels falling in a southeastern direction. Number 32 forms part of a pair of semi-detached dwellings that face onto a small open grassed area. The surrounding area is characterised by a mixture of semi-detached and terrace housing of similar scale and design. The proposal, as shown on the block plan, is seeking to erect 2 3-bedroom dwellings with associated amenity and parking spaces. In terms of the principle of the development, this is considered acceptable as set out in paragraph 15 to 18 of the report, page 235. The proposal provides 2 much-needed 3-bed family housing, which contributes towards meeting the housing needs of the borough. It does not lead to the loss of any recognised use, nor does it represent an over-intensive development of the site, meeting the objectives of policy LLP 15. In addition, as outlined in paragraph 6, page 231 of the report, a similar scheme for 2 dwellings was approved in 2016 under planning application reference 1600916/FUL, which means that the principle of additional dwellings on the site has already been established. Next slide. Banks Close consists of a mixture of semi-detached and blocks of terrace houses of a similar design and finish. The current proposal, by virtue of its siting, design, form and finish, would not represent an unsympathetic form of development that would harm the character or appearance of the surrounding area. It would sit comfortably within the existing street scene.
Yes.
In terms of the effect on the amenities of the adjoining occupiers, as a result of its location, the only property to be materially affected would be number 32, situated to the south of the site. However, again, given the orientation relationship between number 32, can you go to the previous slide? Again, given the relationship orientation, it's considered that the proposed dwellings would have no adverse effect on the amenities of this property. However, despite this, there have been a number of representations received from local residents objecting to the scheme, namely on parking grounds and the loss of existing trees and shrubs on the site. In relation to the loss of trees, 2 conditions have been imposed, one seeking a site survey plan showing all the trees and shrubs and hedges on the site that to be retained or removed, and the second requiring safeguarding measures to be outlined to be implemented prior to the commencement of any works on site. In relation to parking, 2 parking spaces have been provided for each of the new dwellings, which accords with the current adopted parking standards. No parking has been provided for the existing property, but this is not dissimilar to the existing situation on site, as number 32 doesn't have any parking at the moment. Local residents have raised concerns that the proposed parking will lead to the loss of on-street parking, for which there is high demand within their area, which would then result in congestion. Whilst these concerns are noted, given the 2016 planning consent, which saw a similar parking layout, and the fact that the local highway authority have raised no objection to the proposed parking layout, it would be difficult to warrant a reason for refusal based on parking. Finally, in terms of the living environment, as set out in paragraphs 24 to 28, pages 232, 236 and 237 of the report, the scheme creates an acceptable living environment for the future occupiers of the dwellings. To conclude, this development also provides much needed family housing without harming the character or appearance of the surrounding area or the amenities of adjoining occupiers. On that basis, a conditional approval of the application is recommended.
Thank you, Neera. Questions? Comments? No comments, and I'll go to the recommendation. I'll move approval. Mahmood Hussain. Just keep putting Mahmood Hussain every time I write.
Lee?
4.
Councillor Ali?
4.
Councillor Bridgdale?
4.
Councillor Donnellan? Councillor Franks?
4.
Councillor Abbas Hussain?
4.
Councillor M. Hussain?
4.
Councillor Kashid? 4. Councillor Masood?
4.
And finally, Chair, Councillor Taylor?
4. That's unanimous then.
That's unanimous.
Planning permission has been granted. So we'll go on to the last planning application, although not the last item on the agenda. 14 North Street, 249. Nan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. I will be presenting item 1343 North Street, erection of single-story side and rear extension. And there is an update report for this application, as Councillor Mahon has submitted a representation letters. And the applicant side compromise 2-story mid-terrace Victorian property located on the north side of North Street. Next slide, please. The existing property has a 2-story rear wing projection stepped in from the shared boundary, which is not provide spaces between the properties, but it's also a key feature of properties constructed of similar period. Next slide, please. The proposal seeks the erection of a wraparound single-story rear extension to the full width. Oh, sorry, I think the floor plan is not right here. Okay. Yeah, the proposal seeks to erection of a single-story wraparound, so it will be around here.